I have with me Marco Bodellini, who is a senior research scientist in sustainable finance law. Welcome, Marco.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Pleasure. So, sustainable finance entails incorporating ESG factors into investment decisions within the financial sector. And this practice fosters the allocation of capital towards sustainable economic ventures and projects, emphasizing long-term sustainability. The concept is founded on sound principles. However, as of now, we are facing challenges in bridging the financial gap from private investors. In general terms, is the regulation of sustainable finance in the EU responding adequately to the challenge of the green transition?
Yeah, so I think that this is still, to a certain extent, an open question. What we know is that for the green transition to take place successfully, a huge amount of money, including private money, will be needed. And that is based on the consideration that public money will not be enough. Now, we have a number of initiatives which have been launched even at European Union level, and most of those initiatives aim at having the financial system to play a key role in channeling private financial resources towards those economic activities which are to be considered as sustainable. Now, this also means, from the opposite perspective, that all those polluting activities which are now easy to recognize can keep on being performed. There is no such a thing as a ban on those activities. And this is to say that the new system, which is designed primarily by the European Commission, is an incentive-based and a disclosure-based system. Then the question, which is still open to a large extent, is whether a system which is based on those types of incentive and on disclosure requirements will be enough for the economy and for the continent as such to reach the ambitious goals of the 2030 UN agenda and the Paris Agreement. This is still to be seen.
And what are the main pros and cons of the approved green taxonomy?
So that is a great effort which has been made primarily by the European Commission and also by the other European institutions which were involved in the process. It's certainly a very useful tool on the basis of which we are now able to distinguish between economic activities which are labeled as sustainable, in that they have the capability of achieving environmental objectives on the basis of clear-cut, scientific-driven requirements. On the basis of that, we will also be able to distinguish between investments which are sustainable, in that they finance those economic activities, vis-à-vis the ones which are not sustainable according to the classification which has been put forward by the taxonomy. Now, we are still at the very early days in that respect. The taxonomy is, a very complicated piece of legislation with a significant amount of technical components. It will take time for issuers on one side, and therefore businesses, and for investors and financial institutions on the other side to get familiar with this complex piece of legislation and to digest all these complexities. But it seems that is the way forward, and it is good that the European Union has been a pioneer in that respect, and a number of other jurisdictions around the world are following the example of the European Union by adopting taxonomies that, to a large extent, are based on the same assumptions of the EU taxonomy.
And we often come across the term greenwashing and various other shades and concepts related to it. So this can partially be attributed to the fact that while standards, including technical ones, are readily available, it appears that some stakeholders opt for practices that align with their preferences rather than adhering to established standards. What is your perspective on the role of the regulators in this particular domain?
So greenwashing can be understood as those practices according to which a financial instrument, or more in general an investment, is presented as if it had some sort of beneficial environmental or ESG or sustainability related characteristics, when in fact it doesn't have those characteristics. It's a clear example of misrepresentation, which could potentially lead to mis-selling of financial products, and that could be detrimental for those investors who are genuinely interested in finding sustainable investment opportunities. Now, you make a good point, because of course regulators and supervisors as well have a key role to play in order to tackle greenwashing. If we think about again the European Union framework, I think that it would be useful for ESMA and the national competent authorities to get together and to increase coordination among themselves. It would be also useful to further enhance the degree of harmonization among different regulatory frameworks at national level. And of course, since we have been seeing that there is a market appetite for those investments and financial instruments which are labeled as sustainable, then in order to have access to that label, then clear-cut and very precise and demanding underlying requirements should be complied with. And we have a clear example now of this way of proceeding, which is the EU Green Bond Standards, for example.
Yes, in fact, I think this is an issue where we need to focus on the outcome rather than the outputs, and using the same standards to be able to measure and compare like with like. And evaluating the effectiveness of an intervention requires considering the extent to which desired outcomes align with specific policy objectives. So when it comes to policy and regulatory frameworks, what do you think about the new EU Green Bond Standard?
So the EU Green Bond Standard has been included in a proposal for a regulation which has been presented by the European Commission, and which has been agreed upon by the Council and the European Parliament last March. The idea is that for this label, EU Green Bonds, to be used by issuers, a number of very demanding requirements have to be complied with. And the number one requirement in this perspective is that the underlying projects which are going to be financed through the proceeds resulting from the issuance of the bond need to be compatible with the demanding requirements of the European taxonomy. So from a certain perspective, we can argue that the EU Green Bond Standards is a sort of complement of the taxonomy regulation. I think it's a very interesting initiative, also because it will require issuers to comply with the sort of golden standard, which is the standard of the taxonomy regulation. And there are also a number of other requirements which will enhance the level of transparency in terms of reporting that issuers will be requested to adopt, and then the mandatory involvement of external reviewers which will have to be registered with ESMA and placed under the supervision of ESMA. And all these should, should enhance the level of investor protection while diminishing the risk of greenwashing that we have just discussed. The counter-argument might be that, at least at the beginning, due to the need to comply with very demanding requirements as the ones included in the taxonomy, there will be only very, very few issuers which will be able to issue those green bonds. But since there is also the possibility to benefit from that label by reconverting production lines or production facilities, or by funding transition activities, those are probably the areas where at the beginning some businesses will be able to comply with those requirements. Then if a significant number of bonds will be issued according to this new standard is still to be seen, but for sure it's an interesting initiative, and we will hear about that in the future.
Very good. Now, it's important to have the standards, as you said, so at least we'll start mitigating the greenwashing risk. And as you said, it's a journey. So in the beginning, we might see less issuers, but then we'll learn how to adapt to this new sustainable finance world. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you too. It was my pleasure.